No?
Was architecture something you were attracted to from childhood?
Yes, since I was born, I think. My father says I have it in my blood, and I think it's true. My whole family, we're all architects.
So you come from architectural background.
My grandfather was an architect. My uncle, José Luis Benjure was an architect. My cousins, all of them are architects.
Wow.
My nephews.
So you had no choice.
I did, and I took the other. I said I'm not gonna do the same as all my whole family. When I was 18, you're a rebel, you're a teenage, you want to do something different. So I started something different. I was even thinking I wanted to be a biologist, but then one day I realized that my thing was architecture.
So when did you realize that?
I went to Italy to study design for a year, like industrial design. And I had a roommate that was studying architecture, and the whole day.
You couldn't escape architecture.
Yeah, I was helping her instead of doing anything else. I would spend nights and days helping her, and then I said, this is my thing.
This is what you really love to do. So you came back to Mexico.
I came back to Mexico, and exactly.
You built projects outside of Mexico, including in China, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you travel and lecture all over the world. Where do you think you felt most energy and drive for innovation?
That's a good question. I say in Mexico City.
In Mexico City?
I have to travel the whole world to be in Mexico City and find out there.
So there is this drive for innovation.
Yeah, it's maybe an innovation in the way of thinking.
Right?
There are opportunities. I think that what I like the most is that there's an innovation in the way of thinking how architecture is done. Not maybe in materials, not maybe in form, not maybe in many other things. If you go particularly to those things, I could tell you other places. But in general, I would say that what is happening in the level of thinking in Mexico in general, because there are firms in Guadalajara, in Monterrey, in Tijuana, it's happening in other places, but very punctual. And here I think it's really a whole movement, and I would even say that it's a generation below us that it's doing that, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting how this new generation is addressing many topics of creating an architecture that it's really more sensible to people. And for me, that's the most interesting part. And although we are like in the little tail of this generation that not only, but that we're looking for an architecture that become a spectacle, I think that this interesting intersection has allowed me to see all that, no? Obviously, probably some of our work touches that part of our being part of that generation, and some.
So you mentioned the spectacle. So are you still interested in the spectacle, or not as much?
Not as much. I was.
You were.
Yeah,
this is how you started.
Yeah,
So you work transparent.
I was trained at the moment that Mexico started to become global, and what we wanted to do when we were students is what they were doing in the whole world, and that was blobs and blebs, and how we could amaze the world by our forms that we could create. That was basically the moment. But I think that little by little I realized what moved me to do architecture, which was people. And then I completely flipped. I still believe that it's important that an architecture rises the spirit.
Yeah, and for people to come, they have to see something extraordinary.
But
right?
people,
so it should be both.
No, it should be both.
Yes.
Definitely. No, I do think that's why we're architects, because we add this aesthetic condition to it. It needs to be beautiful, no doubt, and beauty raises your spirit, and when your spirit is raised, then you're a better human being, no doubt. But I think that it doesn't need to be spectacular. It needs to be beautiful. For me, it's different.
What is your main concern in architecture?
My main concern is that the second most important thing for a human being is having a shelter. The first one is being healthy. No, that comes with nourishment, etc., health, etc. The second is having a shelter, and architecture is not relevant in the world. That's my main concern.
So you want to make it relevant.
How could architects be part of that process of the human being creating their own shelters? How can we be part of the relevant conversations? And I think it's by understanding that we cannot create the world, that the world needs to be created by each individual. How could we zoom those individuals into our work to just become a platform for everybody to create their own spaces?
Very ambitious.
I know. You said concern. I didn't say that I was going to solve that.
If you were to describe your work in single words, what words would you choose to describe your architecture?
Oh my God, that's a difficult one. I would say, maybe let's say, what are the words that I wish they describe my architecture? I don't know if they describe it, but I wish they would.
Okay.
It would be human, social, individual, but communal, beautiful.
You said something interesting. Architecture only exists when it is built. We should do everything in our power as architects to build. If it stays on paper, it's not architecture. So this sounds so surprising from a teacher of architecture. So I'm wondering if you really mean this, because isn't architecture all about ideas? And there are so many important architects in history, such as Piranesi and Chernikov, Leonidov, Lebes, Woods.
I think the theory of architecture. I think the theory of architecture is as important as architecture. But I think it's different.
It's different.
It's different.
Non-architecture.
Until it's built.
So
and I believe that to
provocation.
No, it's theory. It's
theory.
The thinking of architecture, and I think the thinking of architecture is basic to become then architecture. And I believe that there are people only doing that thinking, and I think that it's as important, or even more, as architecture itself.
So how would you define architecture? It has to be built, right? And what else?
Architecture is a space, is a three-dimensional space.
Cannot be on paper. Would you say
it needs to be thought on paper?
Okay.
It needs to come from paper.
But it needs to be realized.
But it needs.
And
to
how would you say architecture is art? Or can it be art? Or why not? Or how would you say?
I think they're different. I totally think they're different. I think art is a thing. Architecture has its purposes, but I do believe that why the confusion is there and it doesn't has a boundary is because architecture needs to be provoking people in a way that art provokes also people. No, not in the same way, but in a way that art provokes. I think that it also needs to be the representation of its moment, which art needs to be as well. No, it needs to bring people to be able to think and address things in a different way and change in this way, which art also does. It needs to be beautiful, which art also has. So I think that this is the parallels, but I think there's a big difference. Architecture needs to be about space. It needs to be about a three-dimensional, functional space. Art doesn't need to be functional. So I think there is a difference.
And there's another quote. You said, "I've always worked in a very simple, archaic way. I didn't learn with software where mathematical algorithms would form my design. It was much more simple than working on the computer. Our uncharted geometric research was done without any sophisticated tools for the construction. Since I don't know anything but paper, scissors, and rocks." Do you believe that contemporary architecture can be made without contemporary tools?
It's different that when it becomes a tool to doing it than when it becomes the conception of it, you know. So I don't believe we can be in this moment of the world with such an amazing speed without having those digital tools, by no means. But I think, for me at least, I think architecture still needs to be conceived physically, in physical, towards conversation, and not by a computer. With but then it needs to be translated with those tools to be built in the world we act. So I do believe the tools are necessary, and they're very helpful, and I'm glad that they're in, because this allows us to build way faster in the speed that the world is coming. But I don't believe that it should be conceived that way. I still believe that this is when the moment that architecture got disconnected from, like, even more from the human being, no?
So how do you conceive architecture here? Is it starting with a sketch by you, or is it started with a question?
It starts by an idea by me, normally, but sometimes it's a discussed idea, so it's a consensed thing that starts from a conversation with everybody. It starts here, always. Before the paper. So we always think, how are we going to address this place? How are we going to? What are the key elements we're going to highlight to root our idea behind, and then we develop the idea, and then we go to the paper and into the models.
Specifics. You said, I believe that architecture is not a profession. I am an architect. It's like being an artist. You don't work as an artist. You are an artist. So would you say that so I ask you already if architecture is art. But anyway, I mean, this is a good quote, and I sometimes ask architects to comment on their own quotes. So would you like to add anything?
Can you repeat it?
I believe that architecture is not a profession. I am an architect. It's like being an artist. You don't work as an artist. You are an artist.
I think you are an architect. As I said, I think I have it in my blood, and it's something you also.
And
because
also you are not just an architect, right? You're also not just an architect, because there are so many other things, right?
No, I am an architect.
You are. So you think it's just the scope of architecture is getting bigger, but.
No, yes, of course, but me, I am an architect. I need other people to work with me.
Okay.
But what I believe with this is, like, you don't go like when you work in an office and you do accountancy. I think you do your accountancy, blah blah blah. You go. I don't know. This is what I think. I know how I see it. Let's ask an accountant.
Yeah.
But you go to your house and you are a father, you are a mother. No, you whatever. For me, I'm still an architect. I'm doing other things maybe at some other times of the day, but I'm still an architect.
Yes.
I'm always there.